4 years have passed since 2017, and with it we're currently in one of the longest gaps between brand new Zelda games. Yes, even when we count 3D and top-down, as the last overall new Zelda game which played like a Zelda game with dungeons was the organic Breath of the Wild. Well, that is if you count the dungeons in Breath of the Wild as dungeons. And that says a lot, as in the 35-year-long history of the Zelda series, this gap is only surpassed by the Link's Awakening 1993 to Ocarina of Time 1998 wait, which do keep in mind was a transition from 2D to 3D. Well, that is unless you count the unholy Philips CDI Triforce in between in 1993 and 1994. Then why the long wait for Breath of the Wild 2, a game that continues the open world leap that Breath of the Wild made and which reuses most of the game's assets, characters and obviously open world while adding to it. We'll go over all of it in this video from late 2016 to 2021, but first a quick message from our sponsor, Audible. The storytelling expert, and I want to bring up some of my favorite lectures. Recently, while searching for Switch Pro inspiration, and a little bit also for this video, I've been listening to Blake J. Harris' classic Console Wars book, detailing the incredible battle between the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis in the early 1990s. I cannot recommend this title enough, as it is pure quality. Other than this video game industry classic, I have to bring up some of my absolute favorite novels available as audiobooks on Audible, namely Andrzej Sapkowski's complete 7 novel The Witcher Saga, including the Netflix adapted The Last Wish, and obviously George R.R. Martin's The Game of Thrones Saga, A Song of Ice and Fire. All of these and more are available to listen as audiobooks, and by heading over to audible.com/Commonwealth Realm, clicking the link in the description below, or if you live in the US, texting Commonwealth Realm to 500 you will get a 30-day free trial of Audible and be able to listen to my recommended novels and many others, like Anthony M. Bean's The Psychology of the Legend of Zelda, which is now up, so check it out today. But now let's get in depth in the long wait for Breath of the Wild 2. The Legend of Zelda series has never had a new 3D Zelda game with a score under 93 on Metacritic, and it is under this pressure to uphold one of gaming's greatest reputations and close to 200 Game of the Year awards for Breath of the Wild that the universally acclaimed Zelda team began developing the assets, world, and character reusing sequel of Breath of the Wild. A game with plenty of opportunities to surpass the undisputed 2017 Game of the Year, but also with a long list of challenges. Even so, before we move on in our timeline of this game's development, we cannot ignore the fact that its origin point is actually not the second half of 2017, but rather sometime before the launch of Breath of the Wild in the beginning of that year and potentially mid to late 2016. Since it was around this time that the scenarios for the paid expansion pass was set, Trial of the Sword in the summer of 2017 and the Champion's Ballad for the holidays. Though there was a third one, which fits Zelda's theme of the Triforce and the holy trinity of power, wisdom and courage. But just as was the case with the planned Triforce of the Oracle games, which also Fujibayashi worked on while on Capcom, one of the DLCs didn't turn into fruition, but this time out of ambition. Ganondorf is just a too big and too iconic character for DLC, though this realization hit the Zelda team first after the scenario for a final third DLC pack set after the game's ending had been outlined, but naturally before the announcement of the expansion pass. A different reason for this call was that the Zelda team would be bound to developing DLC packs until possibly the end of 2018. This third DLC pack would have been on the same scale as The Witcher 3's story and exploration-driven Blood and Wine, the largest fantasy DLC pack to that point, and which questline would be over 20 hours in length. In other words, this project would delay the development start of the next game in the Zelda series until late 2018 or maybe even sometime in 2019. The Zelda team, headed by Eiji Aonuma and Hidemaru Fujibayashi, made the only right call in the end of 2016 or January 2017, turned the Ganondorf DLC into the sequel of Breath of the Wild and simultaneously delayed the next 3D Zelda game after the Breath of the Wild saga to the successor of the Nintendo Switch, that is to say to 2025 or even after. Nonetheless, until the end of 2018, the development timeline set by the Zelda team didn't change. Most of 2017 was used for the development of the 2 DLC packs, but already by November that year, it is possible their work was continued on DLC Pack 3, but now as the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. 2018 was, as planned in 2016, dedicated to this development, and it was first in early 2019 that this one went beyond its original development time as a DLC. It was also a few months into this year that the Zelda team had reached a point in the development where they felt confident enough to announce to their investors and the rest of the world that a sequel was indeed in development at E3 2019. At the same time, there's no doubt that 2018 was the year that changed the scale and ambition of the entire Breath of the Wild franchise in multiple ways. First, Eiji Aonuma, after being pitched by director Hidemaru Fujibayashi, approached Koei Tecmo with the idea of Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity, a story set 100 years prior to Breath of the Wild. This project would both expand the franchise, but also give the Zelda team some breathing space. In other words, time to work, as 2018 was likely when the sequel truly began to take form beyond the foundation set by Breath of the Wild. Most obvious of these was the story. With Zelda's liberation, plenty of characters now want to meet and talk with her. With this premise, there was no doubt that dialogues and cutscenes would be far more integrated into the experience. Secondly, the Zelda team must have heard loud and clear through 2017 the demand for the return of proper dungeons and a greater variety of enemies and bosses. Fujibayashi and his team were likely in the middle of implementing all of these changes when in October 2018, Rockstar launched Red Dead Redemption 2, and that changed a lot, including depth of character behavior, animations and shop and menu interactions that we see in games, into an even more seamless experience in an equally deep, organic open world. Specifically, animations for nearly everything, as picking up wares in shops and selecting items from shopping catalogs before buying them became now a new standard. Oh, and player interaction with the NPCs, which feels like real people, all aimed at deeper player immersion than ever before. Zelda Breath of the Wild's shop screen system had suddenly become obsolete. The same went for the depth of player interaction with the NPCs found in the open world Wild West. More than anything else, consequences for our actions. From interviews, we know that Eiji Aonuma and Hidemaru Fujibayashi had played Red Dead Redemption 2 before E3 2019, and it is very likely that much like Skyrim inspired the development of Breath of the Wild, Red Dead Redemption 2 has likely impacted the development of Breath of the Wild's sequel. Examples that might have already made its way into the game based on the reveal trailer of Breath of the Wild 2 could include a possible movable camp, action recognition system, weapon modification or maintenance, shopping experience, and so on. And then add to that the Zelda team always comes up with some crazy mechanics that surpasses their source of inspiration and their previous installment. Breath of the Wild's climbing and gliding plus the physics engine did not only surpass Skyrim, but completely changed the way we explore open world games. And it is this level of immersion, but on a more personal level, that is likely being implemented for the sequel. Combining world and personal immersion has not been done in video games so far, and is the closest we get to a realistic experience that we can get in a video game, especially in such a diverse world as Breath of the Wild's Hyrule. Just think of this. What is this game's most important mission? To surpass Breath of the Wild's experience, and also justify reusing much of its open world. The same Hyrule, but deeper and more personal, and where this thread goes on throughout the entire development of the game, addressing shortcomings of the original and then going even further beyond, since that is exactly what has kept the Zelda series fresh 35 years after its 8-bit origins in 1986. Yes, most of 2019 and all of 2020 most likely went into applying this philosophy and working on ways to match some of Red Dead Redemption 2's level of animation and AI, interaction and immersion, and most of all, world detail, and then find elements that they can further improve on. Which is exactly the same exercise that the Zelda team conducted when taking inspiration from the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. This level of ambition obviously demands time and plenty of experimentation, but luckily the Zelda team already had a solid foundation in the deeply organic Breath of the Wild, one that just needed to be expanded with a proper story and voice acting within this one. Dungeons and variety of these, greater enemy and boss variety including a better final boss, greater interaction on a closer level, aka NPCs, and even how we buy stuff within the game. All quality of life improvements aimed towards creating the ultimate Zelda experience, and combined with new gameplay mechanics, it is obvious that the game needs around 4 years of development to deliver the vision and most of all ambition of the development team. So where is Breath of the Wild 2 at the beginning of 2021? Likely still some way from being finished, but definitely there as a game that could release before the holidays. The Zelda team are among the best managed game teams in the entire world, and though delays are common, they are there for a reason. To deliver experiences that will be masterpieces at release, but also solid adventures 10 or 20 years from now. Well, that and showing the game running on the Nintendo Switch Pro, if it exists, of course. Because the Nintendo Switch Pro might also be another reason why we're waiting so long to see Breath of the Wild 2 again, and especially its release year and even date. But overall, based on what we've said, we should allow the Zelda team to continue developing without pressuring them for a release date. The game will, after all, unlike Cyberpunk 2077, come when it's ready. At the same time, holiday 2021 is the ideal release window with the Zelda 35th anniversary and everything. And it is likely that the Zelda team headed by Aonuma and Fujibayashi are trying to get it done by this time. But it will not be a disaster if they delay the game a few months to 2022 and Breath of the Wild's 5th anniversary on March 3rd, 2022. More on that in the video in the end card. No doubt, we'll see Breath of the Wild sequel again throughout this year, but the long wait both for its release and new trailers information has many reasons. Most of them which we outlined across this journey from late 2016, the break from the sequel because of the 2 Breath of the Wild DLCs in 2017, proper start in 2018, the possible new level of ambition in late 2018 and early 2019, and turning this one through 2019, 2020 and now 2021 into reality. Well, that and maybe waiting a little longer to make sure it doesn't release at the same time as Horizon Forbidden West with its underwater swimming and Bethesda's next big adventure in The Elder Scrolls 6. The latter, which we have heard nothing about since its E3 2018 reveal, and which we should be looking out for since Skyrim is turning 10 years this year. But what do you think are the reasons for the long gap between Breath of the Wild and its sequel? Post your thoughts in the comment section down below. And please press that like button so more people can watch this well-researched video. And also share it. If you're new, subscribe and press the notification bell, and again for all notifications, as it is completely free to do. And you help us grow towards 300,000 subscribers. Finally, a big thanks to all our great patrons, and in particular our royal producer Charles Shash on patreon.com/commonroll. Oh, and please enjoy one or both of these 2 awesome videos.